Hi there, I'm Dave Litton of the Projex Academy, and a very warm welcome to my brand new Scrum Project Management Masterclass. Now, this masterclass was designed by myself specifically for project managers who want to harness and blend the use of Scrum to their projects. As you will see, the main thrust of the training here is bringing you fully up to speed with the Scrum framework. And to that end, at the end of this training, you will be fully capable of attending and passing the official Scrum Master certification. Can I please make quite clear that applying for the exam and gaining that certification is not part of this training. However, as you will see, I have included a Scrum Master sample exam for you to ensure that you've fully absorbed all of the information within my Scrum Masterclass. So let me now just take you through the structure of this course. As you can see by the graphic, bottom right, it consists of 4 Scrum Master Primer handbooks, which contain the slides and reference information for the accompanying videos, which I'll take you through shortly. Also included in the course, indeed it's the last 4 video modules, is what I've called my Scrum Blender. In essence, the 4 videos consist of how you can harness the power of Scrum through traditional projects and thereby blend Scrum to your real-world projects. As I said, my Scrum Primer Masterclass also includes a full-strength sample exam to make sure that you're able to attend and become a certified Scrum Master if you wish. The videos contained within this training are all streaming, which means you can watch and learn and listen on any computer device that you prefer, be it a desktop, a tablet, or a cell phone. Also included within our Scrum Primer Masterclass is our unique Microsoft Project Sprint Tracker software. And to accompany that, you can also download our Scrum Excel spreadsheets covering a range of typical Scrum tracking tools. All of the handbooks accompanying this course are fully downloadable for yourself, so that you can either watch them on screen or print them out if you prefer. So let me now just take you through the sections of the modules. Module 1 starts off with a, naturally enough, Scrum overview. That's the one you're currently watching. Modules 2 and 3 cover what I've called the Scrum Essentials, bringing us to Module 4 and 5 when we look at the roles and responsibilities, in other words, the Scrum team. And Module 6 covers what is called Scrum Artifacts. These will include key documents, for example, and deliverables. In Module 7, I take you through the Scrum Vision and the Roadmap. And these are an extension to the standard Scrum, which you'll find very useful as a framework when planning, monitoring, controlling, and delivering Scrum projects. Module 8 covers epics and user stories. These, in essence, are a special form of the project requirements. Bringing us to Module 9, when you and I go through release planning, and in Module 10, in a similar way, I take you through sprint planning. Sprints, of course, are at the very heart of the Scrum framework, and so in Module 11, you and I get to deep dive within the Scrum sprint itself. Bringing us to Module 12, which now looks inside the Scrum sprint, looking at the daily Scrum, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. Finally, ending up with Module 13, where I will take you through the details of Scrum estimating and something called estimating poker. Don't worry, I'm not encouraging you to gamble here. It's a very powerful technique that's used within Scrum. The final 4 modules, bringing us up to a total of 17 video modules, is what I've called the Scrum Blender. And this looks how you can harness Scrum to the real world. Topics I will cover here are the product roadmap, what I've called the empirical project plan, and the Scrum point system. Bringing us to Module 15, again, one of the Scrum Blender videos, and here we'll look at the Moscow prioritization and the Scrum business case. Module 16, again, part of the Scrum Blender series, where you and I will go through risk blending, project delivery approach, and the use of risk burn down charts. Finally, ending up with Module 17, covering project blending, a technique called Scrumban, and finally looking at earned value analysis. It's often misunderstood, but earned value analysis is just perfect for Scrum projects, and I'll show you how to harness the power of that particular technique. Good. So let's you and I roll up our sleeves, and in the next slide, you and I are going to cover an introduction to Scrum. So let's start at the very beginning. First of all, Scrum is a framework, or a model if you will, for developing and sustaining complex products. And by the way, it could do it very well for simple products as well. Now I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here, and in particular the two gentlemen that both developed and sustain the Scrum framework, namely Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. They created something called a Scrum Guide, and it explains, just like I'm going to do, what the roles are within Scrum, what the rules are, what specific events occur, and what the artifacts are. If you're familiar with the word artifacts as something you dig up from an archaeological site, well, in Scrum context, an artifact refers to either lists of the work yet to be done or a product that has been already created and is deemed shippable. So Scrum addresses complex problems by creatively delivering high-value products. And yes, you'd guess right if you're thinking that both Prince2 and Scrum evolved from the IT or software industry. Quite true. However, you will find that you can use Scrum for just about any type of project, and hence an infinite variety of different products, rather than just delivering software. Yes, of course, you can use Scrum for IT management and operations type projects. You can use it for human resource endeavors or financial projects, if you will. It's just fine for business development and even for customer service projects. So Scrum is founded on what's known as empirical process control theory. And you may be asking yourself what that means. Well, I've got a great example in just a few seconds. So first of all, Scrum is lightweight. It really is simple to understand, but like most things, it is difficult to master. The best recipe for that is to successfully complete my training, and as I've said in the introduction, use that with simple projects or assignments to start with. Taking action here is key. So what exactly does empirical process control theory mean? Well, it means that the knowledge of carrying this out comes from experience and making decisions on what is known. And here's something that I can testify to firsthand. You may be aware that I live in Spain, in fact halfway up a mountain, and one of my near neighbours is a chap called Gareth Knowles. And it must be about 6 years ago when the late and great Steve Jobs passed away. And in a tribute to him, Gareth decided to create a sculpture of which I've shown you here. Now I've seen Gareth work and it really is quite amazing. He started off with a metal spike in which he put an apple on the top and then proceeded to add layers of clay until the bust of Steve Jobs emerged. He then took it off that, made a similar sculpture of a hand and joined the two together. But here's my point. If you check on YouTube, you'll see a great video on this where Gareth had used a time-lapse video showing how he created this from literally an apple on a metal spike right the way through to the finished product you see here, done in time-lapse photography. So it only takes about 5 minutes to watch. And having seen Gareth work, he's using sprints intuitively. What he would do is start off with a big dollop of clay, he'd add more, subtract more, get the shape approximately right, and then he'd sculpt, remove bits, add bits, mold bits, and so on and so forth until Steve Jobs emerged, if you will. From what I could see, his Scrum sprints only lasted a few minutes each, and he did many of them to get to the finished article here. And it's a shame really that projects tend to use the waterfall approach, although even that has been misrepresented. As it was originally intended, it looked more like an agile approach than the way in which it's used today. And the towering strength of Scrum is that it will allow you, just like Gareth, to deliver your projects and your products far quicker at lower cost and delight your customers. Just like Gareth, Scrum employs an iterative and incremental approach. In Gareth's case, I saw him making this incrementally, adding little piece by little piece, modifying as he went. Now, so Scrum clarifies the relative efficacy of product management and development practices. What this really means is efficiency. Because of the way in which it uses this iterative and incremental approach, it's very efficient in increasing business return on investment and shipping products early, as well, of course, is giving the customer exactly what they want. So there are 3 pillars of Scrum shown here, and these uphold the implementation of empirical process control. The first is transparency, the second is inspection, and the third is adaptation. Let's quickly look at these first. Transparency. What this is all about is that Scrum defines common standards so that all of those responsible for the outcome share a common understanding of what is being seen. To use an American expression, we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. The second of these pillars is called inspection, and Scrum users must frequently inspect Scrum artifacts as they progress towards a sprint goal to detect any undesirable variances, and to do so quickly. A little thought on balance here, in that inspections should not be so frequent as to get in the way of the work itself, and we'll learn later how that balance is achieved. You see, beneficial inspections are those performed diligently by skilled inspectors at the point of work itself. I'm sure you're starting to see a difference already from some of the projects you may have worked on in the past. And the third and final pillar is called adaptation, and it relates back to the second point of inspection, because if that shows that a process falls outside acceptable limits, or that the product will be unacceptable to the customer or user, then the process or material must be adjusted as soon as possible. So inspecting is spotting the undesirable variances, and adaptation is adjusting to get it back on track. You could say, and I'd agree with you, that this is no different to an experienced project manager, certainly in terms of comparing current progress against the plan and then taking some form of corrective action, or adaptation if you will, to bring it back on track. So there are 4 Scrum events for inspection and adaptation. I'll go into these in much more detail later, so it's just to give you an overview at the moment. Sprint planning to start with, the so-called daily Scrum, which it lies right at the heart of sprints, if you will. The sprint review, which is where you demonstrate a working product. And the sprint retrospective. And this is the team refining the processes they've used within the sprint to optimize efficiency so that future sprints can build upon that. And to give you a flavour, here's a rather simplified picture of Scrum. I'll be showing you the full one a little later. Starting off with requirements, I'll be showing you something called user stories, which are used to lay down exactly what the requirements are. If you've been familiar in the past with large, fat, hundreds of pages requirements given to you by your customer, you'll know what a minefield that can be in terms of interpreting such requirements. By using many user stories, these requirements will become far less ambiguous. Now, Scrum allows you to adapt quickly to aspects such as changing market forces. You might find that you need to bring out a new updated product quickly, any new regulations, new innovations, technological constraints, the list goes on. As I've suggested, you can use Scrum for all types of different projects. And the term Scrum comes from the English game of rugby, where the players get into a huddle in the middle. You may have seen them do this, and based on that to move the game forward. So the first step is to create from the requirements something called a product backlog. This is a ruthlessly ordered to-do list. It's prioritized to ensure that we deliver the most important and valuable products first, and we deal with the largest risks first. Picture this, if you will, as a store cupboard with lots of shelves in it, and the most important ones at the top coming down further and further, much like a hierarchical diagram. You'll recall in Prince 2 that we have something called the product breakdown structure. This is a hierarchical diagram, in that case merely showing the relationships and subsets of each product. In this being a backlog, it merely is a list of items that you need to choose which to do first, which to do second, and so on and so forth. What we then want to do is to take some of those, called a sprint backlog, by selecting the highest priority items and using a fixed regular time box or sprint to develop them. First of all, there's sprint planning, which is determining and setting the release timing for specific product functionality. We then use that to drive the sprint itself, the daily Scrum, as it suggests, every 24 hours. So first thing in the morning, you'll discuss what was recently done, what needs to be done, and off the team go. And this happens in a sprint, which will typically be anything between 1 to 4 weeks. And this is one of the powers of Scrum. Instead of taking what would traditionally be an approved stage within a project, which may last many, many months, and then at the end of the stage, finding out what you've done wrong, what you've done right, and waiting until the end of the stage before you find out whether you've been successful or not, this only happens in short bursts of, as it says, 1 to 4 weeks, so that you can self-correct quite quickly and much more efficiently. What you've then got are two things. At the end of the sprint, you have what's known as a sprint review, which is where the team demonstrates a working product. This, of course, consists of a potentially shippable product increment. And that then leads to what's known as the sprint retrospective. And this is where the team refine what was carried out during the sprint itself, and they're given a chance to optimize how this was carried out, as well as the products that they developed. And this means, of course, going back to the product backlog, where the backlog may be reprioritized as a result of the knowledge gained from that sprint, and a different set of products called the sprint backlog will be selected for the next sprint. Okay, I have simplified this slightly, as I've suggested up here. This gives you a basic idea of what Scrum is all about. Just 2 final slides then. First, why Scrum? A fair question. Well, in today's business environment, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that, your organisation will need to get much faster in time to market for your new products and services, along with early benefit realisation. Return on investment, or ROI as it's called, is one of the prime measurements here. Because money has a time value, getting early benefits for your customer, and indeed return on your investment for yourself, is very powerful indeed. So Scrum is a holistic approach to new product development which increases speed and flexibility, as I mentioned in my introduction. And therefore, to be successful, project teams need a more collaborative approach and a willingness to commence before full understanding of the requirements. Now that's a key point, as I'll reinforce many times in the coming modules. If you wait until you have a full set of requirements before you start doing anything at all, then 2 things will happen. The first is that the requirements that your customer thought they wanted, now they want to be changed. Not that there's anything wrong with change in Scrum, but the second problem will happen is that they didn't understand the full requirements in the first place. So why would you have a project that seems to force you to say, agree all the requirements up front and then start developing? This is where the collaborative and iterative approach to Scrum pays big dividends. Do you remember the product backlog that I talked about briefly? Well, that consists of the requirements, and it's a living, breathing thing. Not only can the prioritization of the product backlog change, but also new products could be added or old ones could be taken out. So Scrum is a process framework with a set of practices and predefined roles. It is not a methodology. Clients often need to see a working prototype to state what is required, going back to the requirements again, in order to achieve a business objective, and then swiftly adjusted, key term, to meet the client's emerging understanding. As I said, they might think they know what they want at the beginning, but we're all human, and that's not the way it normally works. So giving them a clear picture of, even if it's a simplified one, of what the end product might look like, will help them to then refine the requirements, and to do so in a very quick timescale, rather than waiting for you to develop something for months and only then realizing this is not quite what they thought they needed. Still on why Scrum? In order to get maximum return on investment, there it is, ROI again, in every product development for the client, this relies upon change throughout the project lifecycle. Now in the Prince2 method, change control is absolutely central, and it would be fair to say that traditional project management methods don't welcome change, they merely allow it. And what Prince2 simply says is that the change needs to be properly analysed in terms of options and impact, and only after it has been approved by the appropriate people, then it will be implemented. Whereas what Scrum is based upon is expecting continuous change. Indeed, changes are seen as beneficial because they allow early learning so that correction can take place. Now, the complexity and uncertainty of emergent projects often mean firm requirements are not known until the project end. Yes, that really is the case. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, Scrum reduces, if not entirely eliminates, the risk of this occurring. The development process is performed by a cross-functional team, having the right skills, if you will, for whatever the product or service is. And this is done across overlapping phases, but as I've already shown you, these are called sprints and lay at the very heart of Scrum. A sprint, therefore, is a guaranteed time allocation, a time box, as it can be called, where interference from change and other interrupting factors is removed to allow the development team to concentrate on a single deliverable, the sprint goal. Now, if that seems to run counter to what I've said about change up here, let me explain. Once the sprint is agreed, and it may be agreed based on a change that is seen as beneficial, then that time slot means that you will not change partway through. And because sprints are short, then at the end of the sprint, then if there are any changes, these changes may be added to the product backlog and prioritise for whether that gets included in the next sprint or at some future sprint. Good. Well, that brings us nicely to the end of Module 1, a very gentle and top-level overview of what Scrum is about. We haven't finished yet. I still want to introduce some general concepts about the Scrum framework in the next module. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Let's meet again on Module 2. Bye for now.